About today again. So we started in Tiberias. As I was mentioning, the modern road is not the ancient road. So the modern road that we went down last night to get to Tiberias is not where the ancient road went. The ancient road came across by the Horns of Khatin and came through that gap. Also, we were mentioning Kenny yesterday. We had different seats of the Sanhedrin. After the second temple was destroyed, so one of them was Sepphoris, and then after Sepphoris was Tiberias, was a seat of the Sanhedrin. This Rosh Pinah Sil is actually volcanic material that has come across and blocked the Rift Valley. So this is extremely rich soil here, but there was an ancient lake there. Was it mentioned in the Bible?
No.
Agamon?
No, but it was mentioned by Josephus in the 1st century. Lake Sinochitas. And today, actually in 1958, they drained the whole swamp. There was malaria and they wanted farmland. They did the whole thing, and it was devastating to the wildlife. This is actually, when we talk about bird migration, the area through Israel, the land bridge is the second highest migratory path in the entire world after Central America. Okay? So it's a very important, globally, in terms of the dynamics of bird migration. So then they recreated this small lake that we're at now. And there's various times of the year where you have different birds that migrate through here. They're not all at the same time, and they go to Africa and then they come back at a different time of the year. Sometimes they migrate through the Rift Valley and then they come back up by the Mediterranean coast. So it's not always actually even the same pattern with every bird, but that's too big for us to tackle at the moment. But it's worth coming here at other times of the year. This could be completely full of storks and other birds at certain times of the year. So we do have plants here that we didn't find in other places in antiquity. So for example, what's the kind of reed that we see there with the fluffy top?
Papyrus.
Papyrus. So was papyrus all over this bog. We all know what that can be used for. Not only for paper, but papyrus can be used to make boats and other things. Okay, but like we said, there was malaria with that. And there's a very rich peat soil that's underneath the lake, which we have today as a result of draining it. But there is peat you can start a fire in peat and then it burns underground for years. So there's certain things you have to be careful
Peat is
of.
a soil?
Yeah. So. Okay, so today, then we'll go up through Dan and Caesarea Philippi, which are right at the base of the Hermon Range. There is no one just peak that is Mount Hermon. It's an entire range. You don't just look and there's a peak and that's Mount Hermon. It's part of the Anti-Lebanon range, and there's a big hump, basically, that goes into Syria. In antiquity, we have different routes. We talked about you would come across here to the Galilee. If you were continuing to Damascus, you would come up here by Chatzor, which you have to imagine there was a lake here. It guarded the travel route. And then you would come up here and through Dan and Banyas where you have water. The springs from Hermon come out here. And then you would come up towards Damascus and then maybe to Mesopotamia. Another route continues straight north up the Rift Valley into the Bekaa Valley. So you could go up into Lebanon. And there was another major crossroad across here that came down to Tyre into Phoenicia. Okay? In terms of overall geography and modern geography, remember this is the Galilee, but it's divided into different areas. You have the, actually today, the Upper Galilee includes this really high part that we drove by here. And this will play into some of the things that we're going to talk about, especially with Dan, people who lived in Dan. Technically they lived in Israel, but in a lot of ways they were more easily connected to Tyre. Okay. And we'll, of course, the red represents volcanic soils and rocks. Already yesterday when we were driving through, we saw in lower eastern Galilee, we saw basaltic rocks down here. Here's the Rosh Pinah Sill. And then there's this huge plain of volcanic material over here. Lee,
Yeah.
what's this area over here?
Basalt.
Huh?
Basalt.
Basalt. What's the area called?
Every,
Bashan.
Bashan.
Okay, so part of this is the Bashan.
His favorite place.
Okay, and then this map is really mixed. So when you look at a geologic map, limestones, they lend themselves to naming geological time periods, which means it's just basically this one is on top of this one. Okay, but basalt comes whenever it comes in history. You can't really put it in that type of category. So these other colors are related to limestone. We already talked about Cenomanian, which forms the higher peaks. Eocene, which is softer and mixed, and then Senonian are the main ones. The purple represents limestone ages that are even older than these, but we don't really talk about them because you don't really see them in Israel proper so much. And we already discussed a little bit about the soils. We have basaltic soils, which are extremely rich for farming. But if it's too rocky, then they get used for animal herding. Okay, so when we go back to why does it talk about the bulls of Bashan, for example, this is part of the reason. Some places you would use for animals, and that they're really well known in the Bible is because they're not really good for farming.
But what in particular makes it good for pasturing?
It's rich, you have lots of water, and it's also not good for farming, so you're not competing with the farmer. There's no tension because the farmer can't use it effectively.
Right.
Of course, there's some areas where there is good soil that a farmer can use, but